Hello, everyone. Today I have three wonderful guests, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We have Philip Chase, who is a returning guest to my channel. Actually, all three of these guests today are returning guests, but Philip Chase and Brittany from Books with Brittany and AP Canavan from A Critical Dragon. And I'm very excited to have all three of these guests here with me today because the inspiration for this video is that I was watching a lot of the videos. I'll try to link some of the videos in the description that were going around lately about whether you can do a review that is completely objective, the idea of objective and subjective reviews, whether it's even possible. I think most people seem to be of the opinion that it is impossible to do an objective review. AP Canavan actually has a really good video on this topic too, with his review on Gardens of the Moon, which I'll link below. But one of the questions I found really interesting come up in my thoughts as I was watching a lot of these videos was not so much whether a review can be completely objective or completely subjective. I mean, I definitely have some thoughts on that, but I think one of the more interesting questions that came up for me personally was, how much control do we as readers have over how we experience a book? Do we have a control over whether we love a book or don't love a book? And I know there's a lot of talk too on BookTube. I've had some talk about this on my channel before about whether books can be overhyped or not, and just how that weighs into the equation. And I thought it would be really fun to have this conversation here with these three, because one, Philip and Brittany have such wonderful review styles that are very different from one another. So Philip, coming from let's see, your degree is in English literature, right? Your dissertation was on, I'm sorry, can you remind me what your dissertation was on?
Oh, sure, yeah. So
William Morris, is that right?
Correct, yes. Yeah, my PhD is in English literature. My dissertation was on William Morris's translations of Icelandic sagas and Beowulf. So very exciting.
Yes. And of course, Philip is a professor of English, and he even teaches a fantasy literature course. So he has a lot of experience with teaching literature, with reading and analyzing literature. And he has a very unique and refined, of course, review style based on his experience in that background. And then Brittany also has a wonderful review style that is very different. And I think one of the things I love about Brittany's channel is she not only posts, of course, really good reviews, she is very clear about exactly what she likes, exactly what she doesn't like. She has a very sharp, intuitive, focused concept of what she wants in a book, what isn't working for her, and she articulates herself extremely well. She also has wonderful vlog reviews in which she shares her thoughts on books as she's reading them. And I think that it's safe to say, as much as I love both Brittany's review style and Philip's review style, it's safe to say that they are very different. They come from different backgrounds, they have different approaches. And we're going to talk about that, how they approach reviews. And then I also thought it would be really fun to have AP Canavan on this channel, because AP, having, of course, also a dissertation, and you can remind me what your background, your degree is in English literature as well, right? And
well, yeah, it's kind of my PhD is basically on dragons.
There you go. Yeah,
I did my PhD thesis on genre fantasy literature, and how it was the paradigm of genre fantasy literature was influenced by role-playing games and ludic construction.
Excellent. And AP has so many incredible, informative videos on his channel, not only of Malazan Book of the Fallen, but also on narratology and different aspects of literature. Like, he recently just did a video on prose and explaining prose in such a way that was so clear to me. He has an amazing way of breaking down the elements of a story, and also has a lot of input on things that have really made me rethink how I'm experiencing a book and what is affecting my experience of the book as well. And of course, as many of you know, my background is in music education, so totally unrelated to anything. But I just love this topic, and I thought it would be really interesting to have these three to share varied perspectives. All three are very intelligent people that I highly respect. So I'm very excited to get into this topic. Rather than go off the deep end, unless anyone wants to go into this, of whether you have any control over how you experience a book or not, well, I guess I could open that up. If anyone wants to share any thoughts on that idea, I'll go ahead and just open the discussion here.
I think one factor is practice. When you talk about reading habits and how you analyze your reading, your books that you're reading, a lot of it comes down to just practice. So what AP and I have done is essentially by doing a formal degree, we had the advantage of having a lot of practice analyzing literature in a certain way. And these are tools that we have learned how to use over the years and employed, as both of us have taught as well. So that's what we sort of naturally reach for when we're doing things on YouTube, hopefully in a way that's not entirely dry. So I think that's kind of where we're coming from. And I do think that anyone who wants to, though, you don't have to do a formal degree. It's really just, there are lots of resources out there for anybody who wants to practice analyzing literature in that way. And but that's not the only approach, as you said. I completely agree, Joanna. And by the way, also thank you for having us here. I neglected to say thank you for having us out for this really interesting topic. I'm really looking forward to talking about this. And it's great, always great to talking with you. And this is my first time being in a chat with Brittany, so this is an honor for me. And this other guy here, I know him pretty well. So. But anyway, yeah, though I do think that it's really just practice. We all get better at stuff when we use these tools, and the more we do it. I've watched people even on YouTube, and this is true of myself because it was a little bit of a foreign medium to me. There's a lot of things I didn't understand going into. I was incredibly naive when I started a channel to talk about fantasy. There were a lot of just sort of things that people did. I didn't know what a tag was. I didn't know what TBR meant. There's all these things. So this is a realm where I was not an expert, and I had to get used to some of the terminology and sort of bring what I was familiar with, the more academic world, into this world of BookTube. And it's been a learning process for me to learn how to interact in the way that people interact on YouTube. And there are so many different ways you can do it, all very legitimate and entertaining and fun. And I just, one thing I want to get across is how it's perfectly okay to have different styles out there. If you want to try to be more objective, and we can talk about how objective you can be, but I think you can try to be more objective in your reviews and your discussions of the literature. Or if you want to be more entertaining and just sort of reacting to, how emotional you got reading a story, that has value too for people, because this is a community where we make connections and we love hearing other people's enthusiasm. So that's my brief take on that.
That's interesting. And I just have a follow-up question for you about that. Since you said that it's practice, it seems like you probably have a very intuitive sense of what you're looking for when you're reading a book and when you're doing a review, or do you take notes on the side? And because I know that some people that I've seen on BookTube that maybe, I don't know, that maybe don't have the background that you have, or just other channels, not Brittany's per se, but I've seen some channels where they will actually break down into a very systematic approach of, now I'm going to talk about world building. Now I'm going to talk about characters. Now I'm going to talk about plot. It seems like you, and I'm just asking because it seems like whenever I watch your reviews, you just have a very fluid approach to how you discuss the book. So are those things that you're kind of compartmentalizing as you're reading, or is it something that just is really less of a conscious effort, less conscious effort for you because you've practiced so much?
Yeah, I think at this point it might be somewhat unconscious as I'm reading and thinking about what I'm reading. I don't tend to take notes these days or while I'm reading. What I'll do is I'll read through the book and then I'll give it some thought and I'll make some notes. I will usually have some bullet points that I want to just touch on while I'm doing my review, and I'll actually tape the bullet points to my iPhone, and then so I have them right there in front of me to remind myself, don't forget to talk about this thing, you know, and that thing. So that's what I do, and I tend to be very attracted to themes. So I like to talk about themes. Probably that's my sort of go-to instinct, I guess, when I'm reviewing a book. And it allows me often to do a non-spoiler review when I focus on the themes. I think that's for me anyway, that's been the sort of the method for doing non-spoiler reviews, is to focus on the sort of the big picture things, the connections that the book gave me while I was reading, what it made me think of in terms of real world, but it also other stories and bits of literature and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what I reach for automatically. And then other things, obviously you want to talk about characters, and we're trained in a sort of way to analyze characters. There's certain terms that you can use, like whether or not a character is flat or round, or where on that continuum the character might be, or whether the character is static or dynamic, and that sort of thing. And so there's a kind of we kind of think in these terms of these categories, I think, automatically when we're talking about characters or setting or the tone and the style. And it's just, all it is practice, really. It is just, I think it comes down to, while you're reading, noticing these things. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Really, it's just like anything else.
Excellent. Brittany, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think that what you said is very interesting to me, because you sort of touched upon if someone has a desire to do that. And I think that's like an important thing to acknowledge. So just for myself, saying, you guys kind of said your backgrounds, like I have a science biology based degree. And so I'm talking about things like periodontal disease and treatment of dental decay on the regular. I don't talk about, I had to take maybe 1 or 2 college courses with English. So English literature, it's not in my background. It's not something I feel super confident in, like the construction of what makes a good book and taking it apart and analyzing each aspect of it. So I know what I am good at, though. And I know that I'm good at acknowledging how a book makes me feel in a relatability factor, and how it might make other people feel based on real world experiences. So when I got into Malazan and I started making those reviews, I had to stop, because I really tried, and this goes with any skill that you're trying to learn, I think, to begin with. I mean, if I think back at anything that I had to learn how to do and wasn't automatically good at it, it's a rough patch, and it sort of is not the most enjoyable process the whole way through, right? I mean, like, that's how you get good at things, is you get bad at them first.
Yeah.
And so I would try to do that with the Malazan books, and I was just like, I'm failing at this, to the point where I would take so many notes, and right now, and for the majority of the time on my channel, I don't take notes for anything. I don't take notes for any review, any wrap up. I just sit down and talk to the camera. And I was spending so much time trying to think of not just like, how does Brittany feel about this, but like, how would this person and another person, and comparing it to so many things that it took the joy out of reading for me. And so I'm not saying that I don't want to be able to review that way, but I got stuck at that stage of, this is hard and I don't like it because it's making me uncomfortable with what I'm used to reading, and my very much, I'm reading for escapism or to learn something or to relate and process emotion. And it made it into more of a, how can I make this a better review for other people type of experience? And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. So I kind of got like stuck, but I just think it's interesting that you brought up, if somebody wants to, because I know, I mean, I've been reading for years. I don't plan on ending that anytime soon. So perhaps in the future, I will continue on that journey of honing in on that skill and learning how to be better at it. But right now, I think like that review style is not necessarily a goal of mine, but I genuinely really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that there's a mixture of review styles, I suppose.
You know, it's so interesting. I'm going to respond to what both of you said here for a second, because I actually relate to both of both styles, I guess. And then I want AP to go ahead and respond after this. But I would say that it's funny that you said, Philip, that you didn't know anything about TBRs or wrap-ups. I didn't either when I discovered BookTube. I actually had to fish out a video to explain the terminology to me because I didn't understand what people were talking about. But also, I don't feel like I know the literature terms either, because that wasn't I did take some English literature, of course, and I had to do a lot of writing in my degrees, but it was a very different type of writing. For me, like watching AP's videos has been so valuable for me, because even though I might use words all the time, like tone and prose, I don't feel like I've had the clearest concept of what I'm talking about. And so understanding and learning these things in a very clear way has been very helpful for me. And so I love learning about these things like Brittany, but also it's interesting too, because I guess because I do come from an academic background, but a different academic background. When I started my channel, I did feel like I wanted to sound more academic in my approach in some ways. And I'm sure that comes out still a little bit, but I started to look at those reviews where I was trying to be very analytical. And I just thought, this just sounds so overthought. That's how I think about a lot of my earlier reviews. And so that's why I watch all three of your channels, because I learn so much from both, of course, you, Philip, and AP about this terminology and about this sort of view. But I also take a lot of inspiration too from Brittany and Brittany's approach to just being so fluid and organic and relating and creating meaning from the books. And I have found that actually going in that direction for me right now, while I'm still trying to learn these things, has been really freeing for me, has actually helped me to let go a lot and just enjoy my experience a little bit more. So it's kind of funny because I feel like I land in the middle and I relate so much to what you both said. And AP, I'd love to hear your thoughts now.
Well, I think everyone has made really, really excellent points. And if I could maybe try and synthesize some of this. So when Philip was talking about the sort of the academic style and a very formal style, and if you think of that as one side of the spectrum, and then you think of a very personal response, because that's depersonalized. That's taking a step back from the text and you're running through a lot of terms and styles and critical lenses. And at its most extreme, it can be a very depersonalized, very cold, very clinical sort of cutting apart of a narrative. And there's no passion to it. It's bloodless. And at the other end of the spectrum, you can have the reading experience and how you felt when you were reading. And they're two different sides of a spectrum, but review styles are always going to evolve to become an individual voice. Just like authors have individual voices, it's your own personal style that suits you best for how you want to talk about the book and what you're trying to communicate to your audience. And we find ourselves even within a review moving one way or another way in that spectrum. It's not that there's one review style or two review styles. There are a million different review styles, and they are always personal to the person. And one of the great things about this is that when I think the common denominator about what makes a really good review, especially for me, is regardless of whether or not a person is, someone can tell me that they hate a book or they love a book, and you go, that's great, fantastic, I'm happy for you. But if they tell me why they hate or love a book, that's when it goes from personal preference and personal taste into now giving me something that's actually a review, because they explain. And that's the big thing that all three of you do in reviews. It's not just, this book has rounded characters, the world building is first class, the plot structure is, none of you do that, because that isn't interesting to watch and it doesn't tell anyone anything. But when you talk about, I really responded to this character because their journey when this happened, and they had these character traits, and the author really delved into the psychology of the character, You start explaining the hows and the whys. And then regardless of whether or not you or I have different tastes or similar tastes, I can listen to your review and I can learn about the book. But just as that is one aspect of it, what you intend to do with the review is also, it plays a huge part in this. Who's your intended audience? And I know that Brittany and I have spoken about this before, where I challenged her, if she's going to review a book, do her ordinary book review, and then think about how you would do it for the Queen of England or the President of the United States. If you had a completely different audience, and as soon as you think about that, you go, would I change my review? Would I reword anything in it if it was to be presented formally to a head of state? And you go, if that is the case, if you can say, yes, I would change a couple of bits and pieces, that means you have in your head an idea. Even if you haven't consciously thought about it, you have an idea about your audience, your expected audience, and you have an idea about the intention of what you're trying to tell them about your review. And that all influences your review style. And then the very last point I sort of wanted to get to, as Philip said, a lot of the academic and the critical stuff, no one is born intrinsically knowing this. Philip and I had the miraculous good fortune to attend universities where we got the time to experience all of it, where we had experts teach us these things. And it was an enormous privilege to be able to read hundreds of books and to try this out again and again and again until you got a better idea of it. But you can do that on a micro scale if you want, and you never need to employ it formally. But if you think of, at its very most reductive, if you said, right, here's a book and I have two options, is the book good or is the book bad? And there you go, that's my review. This is a good book, this is a bad book. Then you can take a step up from that and you can make it more nuanced. You add in more categories, you add in more information, and you can move all the way along that scale. As you start adding in more categories, more ways to think about it, your thinking becomes more complex. You start picking up on different aspects. So it's characters are not just rounded or flat. You go into dynamic and those different aspects. You go into whether or not they are psychologically real. You go into whether or not you not only identify with them, but you actually can appreciate them as this construct that an author has managed to create out of symbols on a page, that you extend beyond the simple like dislike and you move all the way along that spectrum. And again, it's a spectrum. It's an ever-growing process as we learn, and you move towards more complex thought about it. And that's kind of the thing that I think is very, very useful. There are so many different styles, so many different approaches, and it depends on what you want to say and who you're saying it to and why you're saying it. And then how you say it, how you approach it, the terms, all these things, these are just tools. They are not the thing that makes you smart. This has nothing to do with intelligence. They're just tools that you can learn how to use. And you know, obviously part of what I do on the channel is I try to talk about stuff like this to demystify it. It's not some arcane knowledge. This is something that everyone can learn. And I'm not saying everyone should learn it or has to learn it. It's there if they want it. And that's, you know, what I try to do.
Yes, very well said. And I totally agree with everything you said about individual style too of reviewers. Like it's kind of a process, I think, of finding your own voice. This was something that Alan and I talked about a little bit in our discussion a few weeks ago about how that was something I didn't realize when I started my channel, was that it actually is a process, I think, when you start a channel to kind of find your voice as a reviewer to figure that out. That was kind of news to me, but I totally love what you said too about having kind of like this sort of spectrum and well-rounded understanding of different approaches. Understanding who your audience is also a very important part that actually leads to another question that I had. But before I do, did anybody want to respond to anything AP said?
I think I do, just because so much of what you said really hit home, I suppose, about realizing who your audience is. And I don't know that I thought about the fact that you can change your audience based on the way you say things since we last spoke in our video. Because recently, just with feedback, I suppose, on the channel that I got previously from either reading certain series or the way that I reviewed books, I realized like I need to target my videos to a specific audience because I now no longer want this audience. And I know that sounds harsh, but as a public online presence, you can only handle so much. And so I had to like kind of readjust the way that I review or talk about books to target a new audience in a way, not new, but more so that meshes with my style, my beliefs, way of thinking, in order to remove hopefully a certain portion of the audience. And so I never heard somebody speak about it exactly like that. So thank you for what you said, especially about the way that you review or using certain terminology does not represent intelligence, perhaps, because that's just a sore subject with me right now. And yeah, so I hope to see you talk more about that in the future.
Well, I'm very sorry that you've had that experience. But you know, as Philip and I said, we taught this, and you know, when you're teaching undergraduates, be they English majors or be they only doing like one aspect of, they had to take one class in English Lit to pass whatever course, or it's someone who's gone back to university because they want to try something. You have a lot of ranges of interest in the subject. Some people are being forced to be there, and other people aren't. Other people are there because they genuinely really care about the subject and they're enthusiastic. But you don't just go, well, I'm going to write off the people who aren't really interested. As an educator, like, you're there and you're trying to reach everyone, you're trying to inspire everyone, you're trying to get them all engaged. And let's face it, we're all human and we will not succeed. But, you know, that's what we try to do. And it's not about their level of intelligence, because people have strengths that they can play to. People have hidden strengths that they don't realize that they had because no one ever gave them the tools to explore that aspect. And a lot of stuff online is, I can imagine that both yourself and Joanna have a very different experience of comment or feedback than, say, myself and Philip have. Yeah. And this is an unfortunate truth about online social media. And I would be very, very clear that the insights that both Brittany and Joanna have for literature show a genuine and deep understanding of the text. Mm-hmm. And how they express that is entirely a personal preference. And I'm very glad that not everyone uses the same approach, that not everyone uses exactly the same language. Diversity of voices, diversity of opinions are the things that drive learning, are the things that bring a community together to discuss something. If we all absolutely agreed on everything, then it becomes a very boring conversation.
Right. Can I tell you guys a secret? I actually believe that going on to BookTube has made me a better teacher. And it has a lot to do with, we've been talking a lot about what AP and I and our backgrounds have sort of brought here with the academic stuff and sort of using it on BookTube. But I had to learn a lot to, I think, really kind of understand this whole realm, which is a little different from the academic realm that I came from. And a lot of it had to do with the sort of social aspects of it, like the you know, the tags and all that stuff, which is, it's kind of fun. You know, I've had fun being tagged and tagging other people, and and I'm a little silly sometimes with it. It's fun, but you know, being able to loosen up a little bit in that this environment has actually made me a better, I think, teacher, because I understand a little bit better my students and where they're coming from and how to be social and how to reach out to people and be a little bit spontaneous and fun. And that's a really valuable part of what we do here. So that for me, there was a big learning curve, there. Please don't do this. But if you look at my first videos, they're incredibly stilted, and it was me kind of just lecturing, and I've learned to loosen up things that maybe were more natural to other people. Like, I think Brittany's great at it, at being relatable to people. That's a skill that I've had to work on. So I think it's really wonderful how we all can learn from each other. So
yeah, great. I think that's amazing. And I wonder too, I just want to circle back to a point that Brittany made about how you said that I guess that it's been a process of you trying to sort of be really clear to your audience of what you're about and what you're here for, to sort of attract the right people to your channel. Is that what you would say? If that makes sense?
Yeah, and so I just want to make sure that with the type of content I'm making, I guess it's clear what you can expect. I mean, I like a variety of things. I'm not always one like personality. Well, that sounds like I worded that a little weird, but how could I say this better? It doesn't mean that it's always going to be one thing, but if people subscribe to my channel expecting videos like AP or Philip and those types and styles of reviews, they're going to be disappointed, and they're going to not enjoy it as much, I suppose. I mean, basically what I'm getting at is like the people, I get called stupid every single day on comments on my videos. And so it's like, I realized that I guess it almost like hindered my progress of, okay, I'm trying to use different terminology or analyze a book in a different way. And then I mean, it happens with the channel growth and being a female and all these other aspects, to where it really deterred me from that and made me say like, okay, just go back to what you're good at, so that this is the type of audience that you have, so that you don't have to deal with this daily influx of negativity that, I mean, it affects you. And so it's like trying to eliminate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry that you have to deal with any of that, which is just horrible. It's crazy to me because I personally think you're absolutely brilliant. And I'm also but I was just curious too about, like, since starting a channel, has that affected, do you think that having a channel has affected what kind of books you pick up, or that's just kind of been like documenting your journey in a way? Or I guess the booktube influence on what books attract you, if the comments section even on your channels has influenced the type of books that you pick up. Either you, Brittany, or Philip can respond to that.
Oh, well, first, I just want to say that I'm so sorry, Brittany, that you receive comments like that. And I have received some very weird and scary sometimes, and just inappropriate comments as well. But I don't think it's comparable at all. I do think that being a woman, probably my guess is that you're subject to more of that kind of stupidity. So I just think that we should all be clear too, that is not appropriate. And anybody who leaves a comment of that nature, I will automatically block on my channel, because this is not the place for that. Don't feel like just because you're online and you're anonymous that you can be a jerk, So I was going to say another word, but so anyway, I'm so sorry that you've experienced that. So what was the question, Joanna?
I'm sorry. I was just curious of like your journey having a channel, if you're some of the comments, either, not necessarily those kind of comments, but if your followers have been in any way kind of influenced the type of books you pick up or what you pick up. I know you said already that you're very much into themes in the books that you read, but I was just curious about booktube in general influencing your.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have picked up quite a few series because of my viewers and because of other booktubers. Absolutely. This has been one of the most exciting aspects of this, just behind meeting all these wonderful people like you guys. I have had such a great time learning from my viewers and other booktubers. It's just been tremendous. So I picked up the Dark Tower series, for example, because of BookTube. I picked up John Gwynn's books because of BookTube. I picked up the Poppy War trilogy because of BookTube. I'm going to be, tagging along with AP next year, probably reading what's her name, Jenny Wirtz. It's because of BookTube. So I could just keep going on and on naming books and series that I picked up. And I've learned a lot, just learned a lot. So it's not just exposing me to books and stories that I wouldn't have known otherwise, but I do think that the interactions are bound to change you a little bit in how you proceed in interacting with other people in the future. So, right down to me learning what things like, what is it? LOL and stuff like that, I've learned these little things, but I've also just how I interact with people has ever so slightly evolved as I've had the privilege of interacting with so many people. And it's been wonderful. It's just such a great thing that we've been able to do this. Particularly, I started in February of 2020, not knowing that we were going to go through a huge pandemic. So I just stumbled right into that one, I guess, because it turned out to be a really good time for this sort of thing, because I think a lot of people they were kind of starved for interaction. So it was wonderful in that sense too. And so you meet people, you interact with them, it changes you. You become more like the people you interact with too. So it's really fun.
Wow, the timing of starting your channel, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What about you, Brittany? Do you feel like your comment section has influenced you in any way? I know you also have a Patreon group in which your Patreon readers buddy read a book.
Oh, you might read like everything I read. I love them so much. They're the best group of people. I feel like I couldn't have a channel without them. But yeah, I think honestly, some comments, like you were saying, Philip, and at first I was hesitant to take like book recommendations from people you don't know. And then as things started getting recommended more often, I'm like, maybe you guys know what I like to read more than I know what I like to read. And some of them have become favorite books of mine even. So I always appreciate, like when somebody takes the time to give me book recommendations in my comment section. I just think it's so thoughtful, because they really have to think about what I would like, especially when they like say why they think that I would like it. It's just really sweet. I think also it's affected what I read, because more so at the beginning of the year, last year, you sort of want to be in on all the conversations that are happening around new release books. So I would have a tendency to want to try to read what was coming out right then. So now I don't know, I'm on this whole journey of just reading whatever sounds good. I'm trying out some new genres and loving it. But I will say, I don't want to make this negative. And also in the nicest way possible, I really am just so intimidated to pick up any kind of backlist fantasy at this point. And it's really sad, because if you look at some of my old TBR videos and stuff of all these backlist fantasy series I want to read, it's just like now I don't even want to touch them, because I've had to turn the comments off of so many of my, like the Prince of Nothing, and so it's almost just and I'm a big girl, like I can read them if I want to, but I just don't even want to do it. So I think that's the only like negative thing, is there's some series that's just I don't even want to read and talk about to avoid certain discussion about it. But to keep the positive spin, yes, I found a lot of new good books.
Hang on a sec. The idea that because you post a video talking about how you felt about a book, that gives someone else the right to be abusive. You go, what sort of screwed up logic is that? There is no way in hell that you posting a review of a book, or even your thoughts about a book, your thoughts about the reading experience of this book, what you like and dislike, that does not in any way mean that someone gets the right to be abusive in. Oh, this drives me absolutely insane. There are books that I like. There are books that I dislike. There are other people out there be they friends, be they complete strangers, who have completely different opinions on those books. And we will always disagree. But that doesn't mean I call them stupid or worse. It can lead to, there is something about that book resonates with you. There is something about that writing style that resonates with you. There's something about the time of life that you are in and what is happening in the book, that there's a point of connection there that you greatly enjoy. And just because someone else enjoys it doesn't mean that you should, or if someone else doesn't enjoy it, it doesn't mean that they don't understand it. The thing that annoys me in some of these reviews is when they say something like, say, because we've all read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, at least Gardens of the Moon, and they go, Gardens of the Moon is badly written. And I can categorically prove that it is not badly written because I can point to all of the different poetic devices that Erikson employs. I can point to the thematic structures. I can point to the structural arcing that's in it, the mirroring that's in it, the symbolism that runs all the way through it, the fact that certain narrative events are reflected in other narrative events, causing a narrative echo. I can talk about all of these things, about how intricately written Gardens of the Moon is. And it is not in any way badly written. That does not mean, and it is no guarantee, that you're going to enjoy it. But if someone says Gardens of the Moon is badly written, I can't help it. The first thing I think of, you're an idiot and you don't know what you're talking about. If someone says, I didn't enjoy how Gardens of the Moon was written, you go, oh, that's absolutely fine. I agree with your right 100% to not have enjoyed it. If someone says, I would have preferred if it was written this way, you go, that again, absolutely fine. But that's about a personal preference. If you want to talk about, I think the book could be improved by, then you're going to be making an argument for how the book could be improved, in which case, provide evidence. Build up your argument the same way that you would with a legal case or an academic essay or anything. But people who make categorical statements like, this is bad, and don't provide evidence, or they go, Erikson's character work is bad. And you go, again, I have videos proving that the character work is actually really good. It's just not the same as sort of the general style that we get in epic fantasy. And all of this was to say, you can vehemently hate a set of books, or you can absolutely love a set of books. Join in the conversation about why you love them. And when someone is saying, and if you really hate them, listen to what someone else is saying about how they love them. And that might give you an insight into how you will hate them less and maybe appreciate them more. But castigating someone for not liking the thing that you like is not and will not ever be the answer to having discussions about books. We are here literally because we love reading, we love books, we love talking about books. And I will never understand the mentality of trying to criticize and castigate someone for not having the same opinion or for not appreciating and loving the things that you love. We all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different cultures. We all come from all of these different perspectives. There's no way that we would all end up liking exactly the same things for the same reasons. That's not how humanity works. So sorry if I got a bit ranty there.
No, I just want to add to that too, is that as somebody who has a channel, I'm very fortunate in that I actually don't receive, at least at this stage, very many negative comments. And I'm going to attribute that to being maybe a smaller channel. And as for me, I know there are times when I have trouble connecting to certain storylines in books or to certain characters. And I do try in my reviews, like for example, I just did my Guns of the Dawn review. And I really did enjoy the book, but I was honest in that I did feel very distanced from the character for the majority of the book. And I kind of attributed that to maybe me just preferring characters that are slightly more dramatic. But I did see how that fit the tone of the book and what Tchaikovsky was trying to do. And as much as I felt that way, I could see people really loving that aspect of the book, loving that we have this strong female character who does not have over the top emotions, that kind of thing. And in fact, when I shared that, there were some of my friends in the comment section who said, actually, I really like that kind of character, so I'm really excited to pick it up. And I thought, great, then that makes me feel like I was helpful. And that's what's most important for me.
Just to be clear too, I think the vast majority of interactions on BookTube have been, for me anyway, positive. I mean, the vast majority, 98, 99, whatever percent. I mean, it probably varies a little bit depending on the size of your channel and your gender and other things, I would guess. But for me, the vast majority, I love the comments, and the people have been so kind and so gracious. And we all have our regulars who are so nice to us, and I've learned so much from them. So I do want to emphasize that mostly it's been so positive. But anytime that somebody is inappropriate, then I think it's perfectly fine to block that person, and that this is not a place for that sort of behavior. And just because, like I said before, you're not facing the consequences because you're anonymous, you're doing it behind a screen. I mean, that's kind of cowardly too, I think, but that doesn't give you leave to behave in a way that is uncivil and cruel to other people. So even if it's your favorite book, I know it's funny, I don't relate to that behavior at all. So people who get upset because you don't like their favorite book, or because you like a book that they disliked. I've never understood why, and I guess people just sort of associate themselves so closely maybe with the book or the series. Like, this is my favorite series of all time, and if you say something mean about it, you're saying something mean about me. I think maybe that's sometime I'd like to sort of psychoanalyze that sort of thing. I don't relate to it at all, but I hope that people would understand that when we say things that are critical about the books that we're reviewing, we're not attacking anyone, right? We are simply trying to explain our experience of the book and offer our analysis. So, and that's all it is. It's not a personal attack.
So here's a question for the three of you. You all put reviews on your channels. Mm-hmm. What is the intention behind those reviews? Why are you reviewing the books? And what are you trying to do with the review?
I want other people to find books they love. So if it's a book that I really enjoyed, I want everyone to read it. Like, this is the best book. I mean, I try to say why I liked it, so that way, because there's certain books, my favorite book, The Starless Sea, I know a lot of people hate it. And so I don't want everyone to go into every book thinking they'll love it. But same thing with a book that I might review negatively. I didn't enjoy it that much. I'm hoping that that book can find its audience. I'm hoping that there are some people that will hear something that they like, even if it's something that I didn't like. So it's more so than just seeing if people will be interested in what I read and hoping that people find something that brings them joy. I think that's like the simple version of it.
I'll go ahead and follow that up by just saying that when I do a review, for the most part, most of my reviews are spoiler-free, non-spoiler, with the exception of my Malazan videos, which I guess those might not count as a review, depending on how you look at it. I'm not sure exactly how people define reviews. But when it comes to most of my reviews, which are non-spoiler, I do try my best to give a general overview of the book, what the plot is and that kind of thing, or the setup of the book, the type of book it is, and try to give them a real good sample of whether this book might be for them or not. Of course, giving my personal feelings about it, but I really want people to know whether this is something they would enjoy reading or not. So it is very much, I guess, along the same lines as Brittany for that reason. Mm-hmm. But even if I don't like something, I really want to be clear about what it is, in case that might be something that appeals to them, which often happens. So those are my reasons.
So a review for me is the beginning of a discussion. And I love to hear people react to what I've said and to add to what I've said in the comments. That's why I try to respond to everybody who leaves a comment, which is becoming more and more impossible. But nevertheless, I appreciate that people leave comments and that I can engage with them. And sometimes I change my mind a little bit even about something as a result of interacting with people. So a confession, I actually prefer discussions. What you and I do, AP, for me, that's my very favorite thing to do on the channel. It's just when you and I get together and we're talking Malazan, that for me is I'm in the zone. I love it. I feel like I'm learning from you, and as you're talking, stuff is popping in my head, and and maybe that happens to you sometimes too while I'm talking, and it's never. Oh, come on.
Of course it does. The conversation is a two-way thing.
Yes, of course. So, but that's why I do it. I do reviews because this is my way of reaching out, starting a conversation, and wanting to hear what other people think as well, especially if I'm enthusiastic about a book. I will confess too that I have read a couple books that I decided not to review because I didn't enjoy them and I didn't feel like I could say enough objectively positive things about it, then I didn't want to make people feel bad for liking this particular book. So I decided, you know what, I'm not going to go there. I'm just not going to review that book, and that's okay. Because that's not a conversation I want to be in where I'm trashing something. I'd rather be in a conversation that's a little more positive. So, but yeah, that's why I do reviews.
Yeah,
Well,
and oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Joanna. I was going to say that was a really interesting point that Philip just made, because he had said he didn't want to trash the books, and yet I know that both you and Brittany give negative reviews. You've given a review and feedback on a book, even if it's one that you've disliked. And I think this is actually a really important distinction. You can have a personal reading experience of a book and say, this book wasn't for me, or I am not the reader for this book. And right. You can say why, and you can explain why. And that's very different from trashing the book. And I think that is an important distinction, that you can say, I didn't enjoy this because. But someone who goes on and says, this book is awful because I didn't enjoy this character, I didn't like this character. You go, well, why? And one of the points about the reviews that all of you do is quite often you explain the why part. You explain what's going on. And for me, that is the bit of the review I'm most interested in, because I will never share your personal preferences. And this is going to sound really cold, and I don't mean it to sound this way, but I don't care whether or not you liked a book. What I care about is you explaining these things in the book. And if you've had a positive reaction, that adds to it. But if you've had a negative reaction, then typically I would discount that, because I go, well, maybe I'll feel differently. But I love seeing the passion that people have in positive reviews. I love that emotional connection, that excitement, that positivity. That's fantastic. I don't watch any sort of rant reviews because I have no interest in them whatsoever. They are very unlikely to contain useful information. But that's just me. That's my preference.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think most of the books that I have reviewed, like done dedicated reviews on, have been books that I have greatly enjoyed. I maybe had a couple of things that didn't work for me, and I try my best to explain why. But sometimes I am not always extremely clear on what in a book or a story or part of a book isn't quite working for me or not quite hitting me in an emotional way. And I mean, usually that's the way I articulate it, is I'll say, I think this was well done, but it didn't quite hit the emotional notes for me. I might say something like that. But yeah, I think that one thing that's interesting about doing reviews, I think as you do them, you start to learn a little bit more. And through listening to other reviews, you start to learn more language and more about what it is specifically that maybe doesn't resonate for you.
But those academic tools, those critical tools that we were talking about, that's what we use to try to pick apart, to find out why we have responded a certain way to a text or not responded. The isolating the thing, so saying, oh, this is an archetype, that is the very first point of what analysis is. And knowing that language, understanding those terms and understanding the concepts and how to apply them, that's not the end goal. The end goal is to broaden our understanding of how we are reacting to the text. So where you've said, oh, I don't know why I felt that way about it, the tools that we use are the ways that, like, Philip and I explore those things to find out why it had that effect. So that's, you know, what we try to use them for. They are a tool to further the understanding of narrative. So I really appreciate when people can articulate why they have responded to a text, and that I love in these reviews.
I'm the same way. In fact, when I started getting into BookTube, that was my passion, because for whatever reason, and this does kind of tie into some of my background, I'm very passionate about psychology. I'm very passionate about the why, and why are books meaningful for us. And so I do think that they're, rather than look at videos, and I think you and I have talked about this, AP, rather than look at reviews as being entirely objective or entirely subjective, there can be kind of a spectrum or a blend of the two. And that's something that I think all three of you do very, very well in all of your videos.
I want to say too, Philip, that I respect so much what you said about not wanting to make anybody feel bad about loving a book. And I find that to be a fine line, because as a reviewer, I know in my head, I have absolutely no intention of trying to take away from somebody's reading experience. I DNF books a lot, but did not finish. So I don't read a lot of books that I rate like 1 or 2 stars, but there's been a handful this year. And I try to say, I'm not trying to take away anything from what you liked. I'm so happy if you enjoyed this, but you still always have people that are going to be offended or not quite understand what you're saying, because books can be so personal. But yeah, I respect, because especially on YouTube, let's be honest, rant reviews are going to perform very well. I don't think I've ever done a rant review, to be honest, but there's an audience for wanting to see negativity. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
well,
I know.
Sorry,
Oh,
Joanna.
no, I was just going to say, I noticed, I have never done this, and I don't plan to do this, but I do know, like, from watching BookTube last year, it seemed like a lot of people at the end of the year, a very popular video a lot of people do are the books I liked the least, or the books I didn't like. I don't know what the title is, but books I didn't like in 2020, or, you know, there's always a yearly review of the books I didn't like kind of video. And those are so popular. So you're right that is, there seems to be a big audience for those type of reviews.
Well, the point I was going to bring up was one of the first video series that I started doing, and I just stopped doing it, was I was analyzing Star Trek Discovery, the TV show. And my plan had been analyze every episode and talk about what's going on in the narrative in it. And at the end of it, I was going to talk to a couple of my friends who I know are big Star Trek fans. Some of them love the series, some of them don't like the series, because it gives the different perspectives. And I gave up halfway through season 1 because it honestly was wearing on me that every week I was getting so annoyed at problems I saw with the structuring in this script and how it had been edited together, and issues I had with all of these things. And I just went, no, this is wearing on me. This isn't fun. I could do maybe one video on it and go, here's the general points about why I don't like season 1. And I could do it for half an hour, and I could do it very calmly. But I actually lost my temper one week, and I had recorded something like an hour and a half of me losing my temper and getting so annoyed about this TV show. And I tried to edit it down to a much shorter, and then I think I recorded just a shorter pressy of it, and put that up. And people said, no, we want to see the long one. And they did. So I put it up, and some people really liked it. But I stopped doing that because, honestly, it was not fun.
Right.
And I felt miserable. And it was a part of my week I started to loathe, going, I'm going to have to sit down and watch another episode of this TV show that I am not enjoying, and then record an analysis of it and try not to lose my temper with some of the mistakes in it. And so I can imagine not wanting to do negative reviews.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not fulfilling for you. It's not energizing for you. But there are certain people on BookTube that find doing kind of rant reviews very energizing and exciting for them. So
and that's great. You know, that's good for them, and that's why we have a big diverse umbrella here in BookTube. It's not something I would do myself, but you know, it's great that we have all these different approaches.
Yeah. And do you feel like, Philip, as a writer, because I know that you've mentioned this before, that you would never say anything in a video that you wouldn't say to if the writer weren't in the room.
That's right.
Do you feel like being a writer yourself has caused you, and I think being an educator too would probably impacts in that way, but just wanting to be really empathetic and careful that what you're saying isn't reflective of the author as a character, or the author's character, if that makes sense, or author as a person?
Yeah, so that is my rule. I won't say anything in a video about a book that I would not say in front of the author. And I think it's a good rule. And I think you're right. It's because of my background in education, where I have learned over the years that being empathetic is actually really helpful to being an effective educator. And I would say also because of my attempts at being a writer as well. I understand how hard it is to put together a good book. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, a lot of editing, a lot of humility. So I respect anyone who gives it a try, really. So I want to just respect that and be mindful that I'm talking about a human being's in most cases, it's going to be a human being's most dear expression of their inner selves. So for me to be mean, go out of my way to be mean about that, that's just not what I want to do. So yeah.
Well, we can almost directly relate that back to the experience that as reviewers on BookTube that we might have. It's as commenters sort of forget that we are human beings. We sort of have a responsibility as reviewers to remember that the person that wrote this book is also a human being. And even if they're a celebrity or famous, they still have emotions and can be affected, even if most of the feedback. I had, I was reading a series, I didn't realize the author was watching my reviews. And then once I did, it was just really like, and I don't think I said anything bad beforehand, but I thought, okay, if they're going to see this, why am I not using? I mean, I am a respectful person. I don't think I was trashing anything before that. I just significantly remember that experience and thinking I would be devastated if I knew that this author saw me saying something awful. Like that would make me feel terrible just as a human being that I am. And so I love that you have that rule. I think that's very respectable and good for you.
Thanks. Yeah.
This is a brilliant point because there's nothing that you said that was wrong. And because you've always spoken about your personal reading experience and saying, I didn't enjoy this. And that's not the same as saying, this book is trash, this author can't write, the characterization sucks, the prose is terrible. All those are criticisms of a text that you need evidence for, because that's not personal opinion. That is you're trying to present it as fact. You're trying to present it as analysis. But if you say, I didn't enjoy this, then authors appreciate getting feedback. When you talk about, I didn't like this character because I didn't understand this arc, or I didn't feel that this arc, and you go into your reasoning. That's amazing feedback for an author. It's what advanced readers do when you're going through a narrative. They send you a manuscript, you go through it, you give them a lot of your feedback about how you feel about various points all the way down through the text, and you explain why. It's not just, I like this, it's, I like this because, and then you fill in the rest. You give summaries of, I lost my train of thought here, or I lost track of the character here because of X, Y, or Z, or where did this, you give feedback like that. And you can do that, being both critical in the analytical sense and not critical in the negative sense, that you can say things that you don't agree with. You can say things that you don't like. You can be piercing and analytical and highlight things that you did not enjoy without being negative. There's a reason it's called constructive criticism. That you can feed back on it and explain why you didn't feel a certain way about something. And that is brilliant feedback. And it's useful for other readers. It's useful for the author. And it's useful for stimulating discussion and dialogue. Saying this book is trash ends a conversation.
Yeah, this conversation almost relates back to, Joanna, something that you and I were having a conversation about earlier this week, reviewing books with not to go off on a separate tangent, but reviewing books with separation of the work from the author. And I'm not saying like you should think one way or the other, and I don't even mean with political involvements or things like that, but I think that a lot of times people assume that you're saying something about the author because you have a criticism of the book or a character or something that takes place. I always try to be very clear, especially if I don't know, because I read so many books, to be honest, I really don't know a lot of details, and how am I to truly know the author? So I try to be very careful, even though I'm somebody who doesn't think I need to make that disclaimer because it should be obvious. I try to let that be known that I'm not speaking on behalf of this is what the author is saying because this is what his characters do.
I have one, I guess, kind of final question, and that is, how has your channel affected the way that you enjoy books? Because I know for me, and maybe it hasn't, and it's okay if it hasn't, but I know for me, I feel like if I'm going to talk about a book, it helps me to look more deeply into a book. And I don't know, this might not apply as much to you, AP and Philip, because you already have such extensive backgrounds in sort of analyzing books. But for me, I know that that's something that's been very pleasant. And even just joining the book community, even before starting my channel, just joining and buddy reading with people or talking to people about books or interacting in comment sections about books has made me attend to more details, I think, than I normally would have. So I'm just speaking for myself. I feel like having a channel and being able to discuss books has enriched my enjoyment and experience of the books I'm reading. And so feel free to answer however seems appropriate for you.
I think AP and I kind of talked about this a little bit in our conversation as well, because for me, it sort of having a channel brings that community aspect to a solo activity. So I would get so excited about what I was reading. That's why I started my channel. I was like, I have to talk to somebody about this book, and I have no one to talk to about it. So I would just sit down and talk to the camera. And then over time with your channel, that turns into real people that you're having conversations with. And I feel like there are certain books that I enjoy tremendously more because you get the other perspectives, whether it's just somebody that you're used to talking with in the comment section or your Discord or other people's Discords or friends' Voxer conversations. There's so many things brought to my attention that enriches my experience. Or for example, like you were saying before, if I didn't love something and I ask a friend, well, please tell me what you did love about it because I'm missing it. And then maybe they're able to help me see something I didn't see before, and that makes my experience better. Or also when it comes to critically reviewing, I'm the girl that gets emotionally overwhelmed and I'm like, oh my God, such a good book. I can't believe how this book made me feel. And they're like, yeah, but what about this, this, and this? About the way the book was written or technicalities. And I'm like, oh yeah, I completely did not even notice that because I was so excited. It just blinded me. So I think that it kind of goes both ways, but I can't even, I suppose, describe how much more enjoyable my reading experience is with the community aspect of YouTube. Excellent. It really has been a positive thing.
Yes. Do you want to answer this, Philip? I don't know if this applies to you or not. And same with you, AP.
Yeah, go ahead, AP.
Okay.
You want to say something?
Oh no, you go first, Philip. I always get accused of talking over you.
That's part of the fun, though. So, all right. Well, yes. The short answer is yes. I think that having a channel has changed the way I read to some degree. And I'm actually more structured than I used to be. I used to, of course, I'm separating what I do on YouTube from what I do as my job, right? So my job is totally different thing. I'm very structured. I have to read for that all the time. But for my pleasure reading, which is mostly fantasy, but I do sometimes read some science fiction, and sometimes I read some nonfiction. But that has become much more structured because of YouTube. I feel sort of a little bit of pressure to put out a certain number of videos, to have reviews, and I know that reviews are not the most watched thing on BookTube, which is a surprise to me, actually.
Hang on a sec, Philip. You think reviews aren't watched a lot? How about our poetry videos?
I know. our poetry analysis videos, which I actually have to say are one of my favorite things. I think some of our best conversations, AP, have been on the poems, but it's not something that people are here for. That's fine. Some people are. I have people tell me this is so cool. Please do more of this, which is really nice to hear. But it is not the most popular thing. But we're going to keep doing them because we love it. In fact, I just did a video that's coming out tomorrow about why I enjoy poems. And what I get out of them. So, maybe I'll make a few converts, but anyway, yeah, no, it's more structured is probably the biggest change in terms of my reading habits now. I'm sort of counting pages. Okay, if I can read 100 pages of this book today, I'll be in time to do my review for Tuesday or, whatever, So I'm much more, never used to think about that sort of thing. It would be whenever I had time, I would just read. And now I'm a little more regimented in terms of, it hasn't, not to the extent that it takes any of the joy out of it, because I still love it. And if it ever got there where I felt like this is a drag because I have to read 150 pages to get in time for my third video this week or whatever, then I think I would just sort of pull back and say, you know what, this is for fun. This is a hobby, and I never want it to be a drag. And so as long as I keep that mentality and I get to hang out with wonderful people like you three, it's all good.
Wonderful.
Well, you see, I'm quite lucky in that for my channel, I literally do what I want. I don't follow a set format of this is what is expected of if you're going to be looking at books, this is how you do it. Look at my channel. It's Philip and I are doing a read along talking about one series, and then I do videos on different narrative theories and different approaches to narrative and different elements of storytelling and a slightly more academic way of maybe thinking about it to give people a different perspective. I don't do any of the usual stuff that people want an insight into the reviewer, into the YouTuber. And you go, I don't do any of that because that's not what I want to do on my channel. But one of the great things that has built up, if you think back to when you were a kid and everyone was reading the same book and then you talk to your friends about it and you had that conversation. As you grow up, you have fewer and fewer friends because, people move away. We get married, we move to different cities, we get jobs in different cities, that you don't have that close-knit group that maybe you had when you were a school child. And one of the big things about YouTube that I have so enjoyed is it's broadening that friendship group, that discussion again, to include more people. And one of the recent videos that Philip and I did, I did a reading of one of the Malazan poems, and I asked my commenters to give their impression of it, because so often with our videos, we do analysis of something. I do a close reading of a passage. I break apart the narrative aspects, and you put the video up. And I love chatting to the commenters for every video. And occasionally I'm in a bad mood, and the comments aren't the best. And I do try. That is one of the things I have to work on, is that I can be very, very grumpy, particularly because time zones are different, people. And sometimes I get comments in the middle of the night and I need to work out how to turn certain notifications off. But one of the things that I wanted to do with that video was, instead of me giving my impression and then Philip giving his reading, was to bring the commenters, the community, into the discussion. And genuinely, we had all of these different perspectives, all of these different views of this one particular poem. And I tried to thematically group them, and it was very unfortunate, just for time and practical purposes, you can't include every aspect of every comment. But it was so interesting to see all of these different things and to bring the entire community into the discussion and not just have them comment after the fact. And they will never be my most popular videos. They are never going to be the ones that are going to launch me into internet stardom. But genuinely, that was one of the most fun things to do, because I was truly interacting with the people in the comment section. It wasn't just commenting after the fact. And that is what I have, in a lot of respects, missed, particularly during the pandemic and lockdown, where you didn't have the same access to your friends, where you couldn't meet up and talk about the latest book or film or TV show that you were watching or reading. And that has had an enormous impact on me. And I love how my appreciation of narrative, my appreciation of films and television and books can be expanded by getting different perspectives, because I'm locked into how I grew up. And as much as I try to step away from my background and my experience, which is part and parcel of what you are taught to do as a critic, that is always going to influence you. There are always going to be things that you will prioritize as more important than others. And when we experience other points of view, suddenly scenes that we didn't think were that important achieve a far more emotional or impactful resonance. And Joanna, Brittany, and Ola did a fantastic discussion of the Malazan Book of the Fall and the first 5 books from a female reader's perspective. And while there were a whole load of those scenes that you talked about that I genuinely love, and I think I have a really great understanding of, hearing it from your three perspectives broadened my understanding, deepened my understanding, and it showed me there were different ways to look at it and different points that I hadn't realized were as important. Suddenly I saw their importance and relevance to someone other than myself. And that is what BookTube for me, YouTube talking about books, that is what it does for me. It allows me insight into these things, and it deepens my appreciation and understanding of literature.
I love that. And that actually kind of circles back to the original question, which is how much control we have over our experience. And you beautifully articulated how we are influenced by our backgrounds. And I mean, even in the video that we shared that Ola, Brittany, and I did, we were sharing our perspective as female readers, which might be different than how a male reader might experience the series. And so I think that some of those things are maybe not in our control. However, there are things to consider, which is the beauty of BookTube, being able to listen to other perspectives. They can enrich your perspective. They can make you look at things differently. And I know that I can definitely say that the three of you have definitely had a huge positive impact in how I've looked at certain books that I've read, especially Malazan Book of the Pond, all three of you. And I can also say that those poetry videos that you're talking about were fantastic. I've been loving those videos. And I thought that the one where you opened it up to your viewers to give their input was fascinating, because you did get this huge variety of perspectives, and you were able to synthesize that and share that and bring it together. So it was just beautifully done. So I do think that even though maybe we don't have full control over how we experience the book in the moment that we're reading it, there are things that can play a role in developing that perspective over time. And so I think that that's just one thing that's so meaningful to me about this community, for sure. So I want to thank all three of you so much for joining me today. I had a wonderful time discussing this topic, And I appreciate what each of you contributed. So thank you all three so much.
Thank you,
Joanna.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.